I want to talk to you today about Trump worship. And I really want to speak to mediocre Christians. So if you are not a mediocre Christian, then send this message to people who are mediocre so they can see it. But then they'll know that you're sending it to them. So that might not go well. So share it? I don't know. Trump worship. Is it a problem? Do you understand that the tactic that is being used here where Satan is dividing a house against itself? Now, let me mention to you, there are absolutely those who do worship Donald Trump. I was at a rally, and the lady before me, she began to sway as Donald Trump spoke, and before long, her hand crept up, and she began to maybe receive some kind of inspiration from the dais where he spoke. Now, I think that is Trump worship and is wrong and is absolutely wrong. But for the left to point such out just to get Christians to disassociate from Donald Trump is a clever tactic, but we shouldn't just fall for it. Now, and I'll get to why in a second. Now, worse than that, we've also got Christians that even without that tantalizing, you worship Trump. We've got Christians that disassociate from Donald because he is mean and nasty and curses and he offends people and he's kind of abrasive. And why would we want a man like him in office? Now, I think the problem there is presentation Christianity. I think a lot of so-called Christians or immature Christians or weak Christians are presentation only. Hey, I'm a nice person. You should be in love with my persona. And so if they are forced to identify with someone who is not so nice, then maybe it tears down their persona, and then you can see the real them, the real weak, inferior, mediocre Christianity hidden deep within. You see, those that disassociate from Donald Trump just because he is mean and nasty, etc., I think they are not looking deeply at the matter. I think if you, as a Christian, if you look at the values that are deep, you can only come to one basic conclusion. Now, so let's talk about this for a second. What do we need as a country, or what do Christians today in America need for our country? Like, as we begin to look around the world at large, which is shrinking because of news coverage and because of capacity and capability of nations, do we see any leaders emerging that might be a little anti-Christian in their focus, a little anti-freedom in their focus, a little anti-capitalistic in their focus, a little world-dominated in their focus? Pay attention here. We have one leader that has emerged, Putin, who is talking about nuclear arms right and left, and he is beginning to encroach upon countries that have been freed, like the Ukraine, just for the sake of power grab, just for the sake of expansion. He is just getting more because he can get more. And then when you look over at the Chinese party, when you begin to see that the leadership there is focused on infiltrating the ranks of the world, if you're not aware of all of the communist undercover spy activity that is being exposed currently in America, you're probably just entertaining yourself to death instead of ever getting any good information into your home and into your mind. There are those that are bent on destroying America because America is holding them back. I can't see how someone can't go to the book of Revelation and see that the powers that are going to come against Israel are going to come, from the north. And then there's this talk of a dragon, and then if you think about the emblematic idea of dragons there, or that the 200 million man army that's going to cross the Euphrates River is going to come from, the Chinese direction and whatnot, how can you not begin to think that maybe we need some strength in office and some strength in America. Now, if you evaluate Donald Trump and try to put him on a tier where you're like, does he hold up to standards of Christianity? Hands down, absolutely not. I am not a judge of his character, but like, you can't just evaluate him as a mature Christian and expect that he's going to be a mature Christian. Like, he just doesn't hold up to those standards. But does he hold up to the standards of what we as a country need? If you read through the books in the Bible and you go to the book of Judges, you will find at times the country there needed a deliverer, someone that was willing to rise up and actually strike people, who was willing to lead with strength. The greater the enemies you have, the greater the leadership you need. Now, let's put you in charge of the military. If we put you in charge of the military, how would you get the recruits into shape? How would you forge them into soldiers of iron? Would you do it by being quiet? Would you always tell them how nice they looked? I'm going to positive them into international strength standards. I'm going to make the strongest military that's ever existed by feeding them warm, cozy meals and making all of the barracks more cozy and giving them softer weapons to hold. And it cannot be done. There has to be yelling and intensity. And I do not endorse cursing, but I haven't figured out a way to get the troops motivated without cursing at them. Again, I don't endorse it, but I understand the dynamics here, that you have to put them under intense pressure and intense sacrifice and intense situations. And it takes intense people to do that. And the head, in case you're not familiar with this, the head of our military is our president, which is really bad by current standards. But if our head guy of our military just happens to not be nice, is that a reason we should just cast him off? Or with the things that are happening around the world, like there are people disappearing in these countries. From what I understand, in China, there are swaths and groups of people just disappearing that nobody knows where they went. And they've just kind of been taken away, and it's kind of like got religious affiliations to it. And with that kind of evil creeping up, do you want a nice leader, or do you want a strong leader over your country? To give you an example of all of this, when Hitler arose, he was a terrifying man. Everyone around him was terrified, probably terrified of being killed, or worse, maybe tortured to death and then killed. And so everybody was just terrified of them. Now, to take a man like that down a notch, to take him back, it took the likes of Churchill and Stalin to stand up against him. And I'm obviously over here in America, I kind of put us at a distance from that, but, we were involved in it and we were instrumental in helping, very instrumental in helping. But it took some strength to push back. Now, the reason I mentioned Hitler and Churchill and Stalin is because when Stalin and Churchill met, one of the things that impressed Stalin, and I'm not saying Stalin was a good man, but one of the things that impressed Stalin is he's like, my entire life, everybody I have met has been scared of me until I have met this man called Churchill. Now, can you imagine the types of personalities that are leading these nations being men that everybody was fearful of? And that would make sense, because that means one of the most harsh men was actually leading, because everybody else was, maybe too terrified to do the job or to lead. But can you see here how strength rose up? Hitler rose up because he was strong. But to oppose him, you needed someone like Churchill, who rose up because he was strong, and then Stalin by default as he was strong. And is that not needed today? So Christian, are you disassociating with Donald Trump because someone has told you like, oh, you're a Trump worshiper? Like, oh, don't label me that. Well, do your actions not prove who you worship? Or are you disassociated from Trump because he's not nice and he's not friendly and he's not politically correct? Or is it time that we need strong leaders because dire things are happening around the world and we are here to make a difference? You might not realize this, but one of the only reasons that you exist and live in peace is because of the strength of our modern military. Same principle holds true in the scriptures. When they had a strong military by God's hand and a strong shield around them, then they lived at peace. But when they did wickedness and their armies kind of got, lax or whatnot, then bad things would begin to happen. It is no different today. If you want to make a difference with who you support, then you need to dig into these matters and look deeply and not just look at the surface of how someone presents themselves or what somebody else says about you as a person.